Hi, guys. It's kind of funny, like jumping from one to the other. Um, Welcome back. I see a lot of you guys are on here. I so appreciate it. And I, um, what was I gonna say? I saw Annette being like, "This is gonna kill my Saturdays." Listen, if you are I think a lot of you guys who are here, get a lot out of the webinars. Like I find that when people jump in and are attending the webinars regularly, I also find that those same individuals are like crushing it at their healing process because it's just lots of extra information and support and connectedness, which is wonderful. So if this is you, go outside and listen to them, or listen from your phone, or put headphones in, or do things too, so that you have your Saturdays. You guys are so amazing. Okay, so hello, Uma. Uma says, thank you for your video about the worst attachment. You're welcome. Thank you for appreciating that. I see so many, because there's so many beautiful people from all different attachment styles that are trying to get better. And then sometimes people are putting down one and a specific type. And it's just, everybody's a human with different patterns of pain. So I learned about attachment 10 years ago in my college textbook. I resonated with FA, and then I panicked and cried because the first messaging I got was that FAs were super rare and too hopeless to have a chance at normal life and love. Such a defeating message with somebody with already so many core wounds. Exactly. I can't even believe that that's the type of messaging, honestly, that people put out there. It's just extremely, extremely limiting. I must have repressed this because I only recently remembered that experience and the despair I felt at the time. I never bothered to work on things then because it seemed hopeless. Wow. So it kind of like blocked us from, I think things happen at their due time. I really do. But I think that, sometimes it can block you from really evolving and developing. Instead, I listened to pop psych dating advice and suffered many heartbreaks. Yeah, I don't want to get too far into that. But I do want to say sometimes the pop psych dating advice can be really harmful in a way too, because it's like, here's how to, and not all of it. There's some stuff that's beneficial, but a lot of dating advice out there and dating coaches, instead of people digging into like the roots of problems and things like that, sometimes it's like, here's how to manipulate the person to want to be with you. And it's like, oh my goodness, then you're going to be with the person, and either you're going to be stuck putting on a facade of the person you were, or you're going to be stuck in a situation where you're like not really fulfilled and not feeling like you can fully be seen and heard and show yourself. And it becomes like the art of a superficial relationship instead of the art of loving and caring and giving and receiving and healing and the really important things that make relationships go round, right? And the essence of what the value of a relationship is all about. So you said, thank you for speaking hopefully and compassionately about all attachments. It helped me forgive prior partners, my caregivers, and myself. This is the first time I've ever felt hopeful about love, maybe ever. Wow. That is really, really heartwarming to see. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you're showing up so beautifully in here too. Like, I know you're really doing the work, which is amazing. And we talked so much about, in the past webinar just a moment ago, we talked so much about the importance of just being gentle to yourself, how it's going to forever be one of the most important and empowering things we all do on our healing journeys, period. So that's a really powerful thing to be able to do and to be able to show up for, is just self-connection, kindness in relationship to ourselves. So Uma goes on to say, our teachers pets FAs. I was one in school, and I feel like I'm once again here in PDS. LOL, I recognize those feelings. I feel silly. I'm just excited. Listen, I think there's a really big difference, honestly. I think fearful avoidance I think teachers' pets are all different styles. I think it's more of like needs that you're trying to get met for like significance or recognition. I think it's more dependent on that than your attachment style. I wouldn't say there's a strong enough correlation, because I've seen a lot of fearful avoidance, if anything, who are like rebelling against authority because of the distrust wounds with parents. So I think it kind of splits off, right? It's like, you're an authority figure. I don't trust you. I'm not going to do my work. These sorts of things too. So I wouldn't say that. And I would also say that fearful avoidance, more are just really excited when they're passionate about something and go all in. And so I think you're probably coming from that space more than like a teacher's pet. Like, I wonder if you would feel that. I would have never thought that about you in my life, just so you know. And I don't think that about you, but I just think you're participating, right? Like, a lot of you guys in here are just really great participators and share and ask and all these different things, which is wonderful. But it's an interesting thought, like an insightful question. So Stain says, Thais, why do I feel that I'm constantly in a rush and that I don't have enough time? What does this say about me? What do I do about it? For example, when I start my morning routine, I feel I need to get all the stuff done that I planned and that I don't have enough time, like a constant urge inside of me. I love this topic. Okay. Number one, it's not that you don't have enough time. Time is neutral. Time has no meaning. If I told you you can have all of the time you want, but you can only spend that time watching TV shows of children's cartoons, you probably wouldn't want more time. You'd probably be like, oh my gosh. Or if I told you, in an even more magnified version of that, like, you can have all the time you want in the world, but I'm going to tell you, you can't do anything exciting or new. You're not allowed to learn anything, can't do any personal growth, and you're going to be in chronic pain. You'd probably be like, I don't want to live like that. So it's not time. Time is neutral. It's the subconscious things that we're trying to get time for. And often what happens is if we have competing needs in our personality need structure, or if we just like have these belief patterns that only allow us to meet needs in certain ways, then we feel like we don't have enough time, but it's actually not enough time for self. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that we have Bob, and let's say Bob's the healthiest version of himself today. Let's say Bob's needs are, his personality needs are career, personal growth, emotional connection, comfort. Okay, let's just say his top 4. Maybe he is in a job he loves. Maybe he's getting a lot of career needs met, personal growth, emotional connection. Maybe he loves his coworkers, but maybe he's always so focused on that stuff, he's not getting enough comfort. And so then he might feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting, I don't have enough time, but it's actually, I don't have enough time to just wind down and just be comfortable and peaceful and relaxed. And so when there's all these needs where we're pushing for some, but we're ignoring others, especially if they can be competing, like, maybe your lifestyle is really centered around these 3, but one gets left behind. That's when we feel like we don't have enough time. So start by going, what do I not have enough time for? What needs am I actually not meeting? And then I would ask myself too, how can I manage my expectations? Like, sometimes we have these subconscious patterns where it's like, if you grew up in a way where you were always pressed for time, maybe you had a really busy family life or lots of extracurriculars in childhood, then the subconscious just knows how to react that way. And so you'll often like pile too many things on your plate because it's a subconscious comfort zone. It's just patterns repeating itself in different forms in your adult life, which obviously is like the essence of the human experience to a certain degree. And so what you can do is be like, what do I not have enough time for? What am I trying to create time for? And then be for that solution instead of against the time problem. Be like, how am I going to, it's like the same idea we talked about in this past webinar. It's like, don't tell yourself I'm not going to eat junk food. Tell yourself I'm going to eat healthy foods. I'm going to eat healthy foods this many times a day. So be for the solution. So in this case, you would go, I'm going to non-negotiably have time in my morning routine or evening routine or whatever it is that's for these other things that I've been ignoring. And by doing that, you actually solve the root of the problem. So great question. Kelly, is it possible to get transcripts of the webinars? Thought for the future. It's actually like amazing, like such an amazing idea because it would be so helpful on so many levels. I have no idea how. Like I don't think we could hire somebody to type it. I think there's like a software called Rev. I looked into it once years ago. I can't remember why I looked into it, but something, and I think it transcribes things. But I'm going to look into it because, that would be amazing. It would be amazing for, I think, all students. Oh, it would be so cool, too, because we could make transcripts from all the past ones. I'm definitely going to look into that. And then, because there's sometimes some, like, really important components of the webinar I know that stick out to specific people, like when you guys have your questions or like a really important topic. So that's an amazing idea. It'd be cool to like publish them into like books or something too. I love that. My idea wheels are like spinning now. Thank you for sharing that. So Rochelle says, how can DAs better identify their self-talk and core wounds as they are often unaware about it since they repress everything? Great question. So here's what I would do. If you pay close attention, dismissive avoidants usually experience it like this. It's not that so part of it, yes, they repress everything, but also they still have like emotions coming up, but the emotions are just quieter and they are more surface versions of emotion. So for example, let's say we have the emotion of like hatred, which I don't even like saying that word. And then let's say out of that, maybe very, very light expression or surface expression of that emotion might be something like resentment, disdain, things that are like more surface versions. Okay. Another good example would be like extreme anger, right? I think there's a word I'm trying to think of for extreme anger, enraged. And then we have something like bitterness, agitation, irritation, right? The dismissive avoidants often living in that space when they do feel their emotions. They're often living in irritation, agitation. A lot of their core emotional patterns are like irritation, agitation, impatience, low-level frustration, annoyance, a low-level stress or distress, these sorts of things. So what you want to do is make a list of the emotions you feel and then ask myself, okay, what are the thoughts connecting to these things? What are usually the cause and effect of this? And practice getting really tuned into those high level emotions first. And then when you go into this like high level emotional space and then you get really clear on what you're feeling at those high level emotions, you're actually practicing getting in touch with your emotions. And it kind of is a way of like de-thawing. It's a great strategy to de-thaw into feeling your emotions more because you start feeling like, oh, that wasn't so bad. It was safe to feel a little bit of irritation and to notice it. So you also start programming just as a byproduct of that your emotions themselves are safe and that they're good to feel and that they are safe to feel and that you can do something with them and you can there's their feedback. And so you start developing a healthy relationship to your emotions that way. So definitely do that. And then underneath, you can ask yourself, keep practicing that set of questions, which is, what does that mean? Or why would that be bad? Or what am I afraid would then happen? So it's called laddering in CBT. So what you can do is you can go, if I'm irritated, okay, why? What's causing my irritation? Oh, the person asked to come over and I didn't want to spend time with anybody. Okay, what would that mean? Or why would that be bad? Or what am I afraid would happen? Well, I'm afraid they're going to stay for so long. And then what am I afraid of? That I'm going to feel stuck, that I'm going to feel like I don't have time to self-soothe, that they're going to want to get too close to me before I'm ready and it's too vulnerable right now. Like, so get to the root of that. And then you'll start seeing that relationship between the deeper subconscious wounds and your conscious mind's experiences. So wonderful, wonderful questions. Empaths versus narcissists. Usually they seem similar in ways. Hypervigilant, insecurities, deep wounds. Then what's the difference? Okay. This is a great question. Meek versus confident. I feel that FAs can seem like narcissists and empaths. Okay. I have seen many people say things like this. I've seen many people say like the empath and the narcissist are the same person, or the empath only, they're just the narcissist in disguise because what they're actually doing is they're just trying to meet the needs of others so that then they can get their needs met for significance and blah, blah, blah. I see like where somebody's coming from. I see like, oh yeah, there are patterns absolutely of the empath actually being the person that maybe they do meet the needs of others sometimes because it does make them feel needed and wanted and safe and significant. But to say that the narcissistic personality disorder and the empathic person are the same person is so incorrect. It's like wildly, wildly wrong. So here are some major difference. It's an excellent question. It's actually like an insightful. So I'm not saying wildly wrong to you, because you're saying what's the difference? Not, oh, they're the same person. So I like that you're asking it. But what's interesting is that, like, I've seen other people say stuff like this over the years. Number one, the empath usually does not have like a completely empty bucket of needing significance at all costs. Like, there's no grandiosity a lot of times as empaths. Where the narcissist has like excessive needs for grandiosity, for self-importance, for filling that bucket and significance. Number two, an empathic person, and I'm talking like from the DSM kind of narcissist, not like narcissistic, right? Number two, the narcissist will actively exploit people or take advantage of people without thinking, right? Like, that's that, if it feels like it serves them and meets their needs, they will do it. The empath would not do that. Like, they would feel too badly about that. So it's not going to usually take place whatsoever. Number three, another really big component is if you look at the DSM, one of the qualities to classify, you need 5 out of 9, but another major qualifying factor for a narcissist is a lack of ability to empathize. So they struggle with empathy, and you will absolutely not see the narcissist empathize when it's a war of differences, or like when there's a conflict. Like if somebody says, I want to buy the blue car, and the wife says, no, I want to buy the red car. There's not empathy for like the want of the wife to buy the red car or whatever, the other color car. Literally, it's like, if your needs conflict with my needs, I don't have time to empathize with you if I'm the narcissist. Empaths are often in this habitual state of self-sacrificing because they feel for others before they feel for themselves. Now, there are components that are similar where like both can be hypervigilant, both can have insecurities, both can have deep core wounds. Narcissists can be a fearful avoidant attachment style, but usually with the empathy tuned down, shut down, and also in their needs structure, their basic human needs structure, significance is the highest, where I rarely see significance, not rarely, but I don't very often see significance as the highest for the fearful avoidant. And to a certain degree, yes, there's trauma, but there tends to be not all, I would say it honestly, as a general rule, the traumatic events, if we were just measuring in like magnitude, can, not always, but can be less for a narcissist than for a fearful avoidance. Fearful avoidants usually have like excessive ongoing imprints. Usually narcissists, and what I've seen and experienced, yes, they can have like big deaths and loss of parents and things like that are very traumatic. But I've seen severe narcissists from just people who have opposing parenting styles and felt insignificant and like they didn't matter to an uninvolved parent growing up often, or things like this. So it's not always in these like extremes, though there has to be enough major challenges for it to be traumatic enough to create a narcissist anyways, right? So those are some of the big differences that you'll see. And then absolutely both share hypervigilance, insecurities, deep core wounds, things like that. What I often see more of is fearful avoidance are more in alignment with borderline personality disorder, in terms of just relationship correlation, like between style and disorder. But a lot of the healing is based on very similar things as well. So it's a great question and it's very insightful. And yeah, to touch on some of these other things you've said too, like fearful ones can be a little more meek, often don't want center of attention too much. That's the opposite for a narcissist a lot of the time, things like this. So great question. But I've seen there's a lot of people out there who are sharing that information online. I took a course once. It was actually a great course, but it was with somebody, and I saw him put a video the other day that said that. And I'm like, oh no, it's like false information. Now, some empaths can give so much that then they can be forced to become slightly narcissistic because they're giving in excess to the point where they run dry. And then they have to take from others. They have to rely on others. They have to whatever out of desperation. But that's not like their personality. It's like the circumstances, and they often don't like being in them. So sometimes you'll see that. And sometimes empaths can get into a space as well where they are, giving gives them a sense of significance. But usually what you'll see if that's the case is, and I've seen this in people, the giving is like they give and then they like are really waiting for the response. Like, tell me how great I am for giving that to you. Or like, they're giving and it's to the point of like, you can tell they're trying to like sort of manipulate from that, or they're trying to give to get, they're trying to give to receive. A lot of empaths just give because they like to give. And then, if they give, and then somebody treats them poorly, they might get reactive. They might then be like, hey, I've been showing up really well. Don't be rude, or, be kind, or what, something like that. But they're not like giving to keep every single track of everything. They're giving because it gives them something. And then if they absolutely don't receive, sometimes they can get triggered because of the injustice of the conflict of imbalance, or the perception of imbalance, which is what conflict is made up of. But yeah, great question. So Aaron says, my boyfriend, dismissive avoidant, still has an active friendship with a woman he gave a 3-year affair to. I feel triggered by this. My dad had an affair. He made steps to minimize the friendship, but I can't get over it. So was the affair in the relationship to you? Will you type in the comments? Was that, I scroll down to the bottom. Was the affair in your relationship, or was it an affair from a previous relationship that he was in? I'm curious to hear that. So number one, I would do the work on your dad's affair, not to save the relationship, but literally just to help you process that, because obviously it's coming up as a trigger point, right? So I would 100% dive into that for a moment. Sometimes the cursor doesn't load, so it looks like I only have a few comments, and then I start scrolling, and then it gets really small all of a sudden. So I'm going to make the questions a little bit more succinct so I can get to more of them. But here's what I would say. So often what can take place, okay, is that you can be in a situation where that wound is like repeating itself. So you're experiencing the pain of this experience now, combined with all the unresolved pain from the past. So what did you make it mean when your dad had an affair? Write those things out, work on those stories. Not just what did you make it mean about you, but what did you make it mean about around men? Okay. And your ability to trust and all these different things. Do work on those things. Then I would go into what were your unmet needs, and where were those needs met in other forms at the time, and how can you meet those needs actively in relationship to yourself now? So I would definitely do a dive into that, Aaron. And then what I would do is I would ask myself very honestly, are there things I can work around? Okay, can I work on the stories? Can I work on the needs in this relationship with my current partner? Or will this always just be completely unacceptable to me? Let's say it was a person he had a 3-year affair with in our relationship. Okay. Oh, no, it wasn't. He was single for 5 years. They've been friends for 4 years. Well, she's been married the whole time. Okay. I see that. Okay. So what I would do then is I would sit down with a pen and paper, and I would literally write out every single thing about it that bothers you. I feel like I can't trust him. I feel like he might still have feelings. I feel like, why do they need to be friends? I feel like the fact that he needs to be friends means he's putting that relationship above the relationship to me, because it's something that I need. I feel like he might leave me if she got out of the relationship. I feel like I can't trust him. I feel like I'm not sure what they talk about. I feel like you might find 25 things in there. Write them all out. And then work through everything. I know it's a pain in the butt. It'll take you an hour. It'll be so friggin' relieving to do this. Then check on every single one. Are these stories? And if they're stories, great. You equilibrated them. If they're not stories, then you know that you have a need around it instead. So let's say you're like, they might be talking about things that would make me feel uncomfortable. Or they might be flirting too much in a way that feels like it's an emotional violation of the relationship. Is it true? Well, if you really can't know because you don't know what their conversations are about, then you jump to the need. Okay, so then what do I need to feel better in this situation? Maybe I need to ask for transparency around what they talk about. Maybe I need to go to the table with him and say, hey, I'm realizing that for me to support this friendship, I appreciate that you're minimizing it. I appreciate that you've taken the steps to do so and that you hear me enough to take action. I really do. But it still shows up for me as something really uncomfortable. And these are some of the fears that I have in the relationship. And, can I ask you some questions? Because the more transparency I have, the safer I'm going to feel in this situation. And so I would ask a few questions and just say, are you very flirtatious? What do you guys chat about? Like, what's the dynamic of the relationship like? And if he's like, no, like we just had a bond, we've known each other for a long time, we've just maintained a friendship, there's nothing there, then you can reevaluate what you need. Right. But the idea is you have to take yourself into consideration every single step of the way. And we take ourselves into consideration best the more we show up and get really clear on everything that we're feeling. The more we consider exactly what we're feeling, the more we can show up on behalf of it. So great questions. Hi, Rachel. I've missed you all so dearly since I saw you 30 seconds ago. Hi, Irene. Okay, Dawn says, yesterday you touched on relationship issues with my wife after her affair, but you asked for context. I hope this helps you. I'm keen to reconcile with her. My wife is DA, 25, and I'm SA, and I'm a 28 SA with some anxious tendencies. Her mother was a sociopathic drug dealer, convicted felon. She suffered overt abuse. She divorced her mother at 16 via court. Jeez. She's probably, she put a gun to my wife's head. Wow. And pulled the trigger, joking she'd be dead if it was loaded. Wow. I'm so sorry to hear that. Thankfully, other family members were a better influence in her teenage years. She is the classic workaholic that's uncomfortable with vulnerability. I worked on that from the beginning with her. January 2018, discussed our future, job offers, houses, started doing more for myself. We focused on her career. Our sex life was good. A few days later, she began deactivating strategies. Okay. Next day, I asked what was bothering her and expressed concern. She may need to see someone, said I was imagining it. I pressed the issue and she lashed out. She's a fearful avoidant. She's not a dismissive avoidant. 100%. I pressed the issue and she lashed out both physically and emotionally. I was shocked. I cried. She said that was pathetic. Assaulted me again and demanded a divorce. I was shocked. I have to stress our relationship is not like this normally. Our relationship was normally healthy. This created push-pull dynamics for the next 9 months. She'd apologized for behaving badly, said she loved me, went on dates, had sex, etc. But every few weeks, she would try deactivating again. She'd reintroduce other people, dating other people randomly, be protective of her possessions, start fights without obvious cause, threaten the relationship, and withdraw before going back into harmony. During this time, she talked a lot to someone she worked with, much older, married man, sharing with 3 kids. Okay. It was like an escape fantasy. I think it's more like limerence, to be quite honest, based on unmet needs she had. Not because of you, because of probably not having a healthy father figure around, things like that. Things were good for a few months. She couldn't do family stuff. She acted like she was trapped and said it was like being in her mom's house. I never harmed her. March 2019. She moved in with this married man. I felt betrayed and abandoned. Now a year later, I've had therapy. I want to reconcile with her. I see it as attachment trauma issue that caused the affair, but perhaps I'm intellectualizing. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to invite her over for a talk. Want to fix her marriage if she's willing. Any advice on how to make her feel safe or comfortable? Okay. So number 1, thank you for sharing that. Number 2, I'm so sorry to hear you went through all of that. It's very extreme. There's a principle, right, where trauma causes trauma. Hurt people. And so when there's a lot of trauma, it tends to spread. So I'm going to say a few things. Number 1, I obviously am not able to like diagnose her, anything like that. But she's definitely a fearful avoidant. I can tell you that. And I can say attachment style stuff because it's not a diagnosis of anything. It's a pattern of how we attach to other people. She's definitely fearful avoidant, probably leaning dismissive. Um, and that's really clear to me, like without a sliver of a doubt, especially based on push-pull, that she's open to having sex, that she's warm and then cold. Like a lot of the stuff you said, it was like check, 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 check. And she might even have borderline tendencies, based on some of the things that you said as well. So, number one, before you even think about reconciling, I want you to know a couple things. She, the poor, poor, poor thing, has been through an enormous amount of trauma. To have your primary caregiver in your world put a gun to your head and pull the trigger to you, even though they know it's not loaded, you do not know anything like that as a child. So to feel like your caregiver might kill you is like one of the most extreme forms of trauma a human being can go through. Now, Dawn, when I say this to you, I imagine you feel that really very much in your heart. And I also imagine that your next impulse when I say that is to feel the need to go towards her and protect her and fix it and be there for her. And I want you to pull out of that feeling and try to notice the difference between you wanting to fix that for her because you empathize so much, you feel so much, you care so much about her and love her, versus like you being able to love her in this moment as who she is, which is the exact person she is, isn't the potentially healed version of her who's overcome all of that, but this person who she is right now, what it means to truly, truly love somebody. And as hard and as challenging as this can be, is not to love from a codependent space. It's to love in the sense of, who are you now? What are you experiencing? What do you need? Where are you at? And can I experience and respect those boundaries? And can we have an energetic exchange of giving and receiving love based on exactly what you're telling me and showing me who you are? And I think that this beautiful part of like the empath's mind, which has so many really powerful components to it, sometimes makes this accidental mistake. And fearful, avoidance, and anxious, preoccupied both do this. But sometimes it goes, I'm going to fix and heal this person. I love them. Nobody should have to go through that. I'm going to fix and heal them. I'm going to show up for them. And we stop seeing that person. And where she might be at right now is, I don't know what the hell I'm experiencing, what's going on inside of me. Being in relationships feels really scary and unsafe. It brought up so many painful things inside of me when Dawn and I went through that. And I am not ready to see a therapist because I am desperately afraid to uncover anything. And every time you bring that up or whatever, she might feel like, hey, you're not seeing me. I feel terrified. You're trying to push me into something I feel terrified towards and not ready for. And it creates this push-pull dynamic where you can't like gain traction in a relationship when we're loving for like the saved version and what we want to do to help the person, but we accidentally stop seeing them in this moment right now based on their needs and preferences and where they're at and who they are. And everybody has a version of this, right? You know, we have a version of this for our children, big time, for other loved ones in our lives. We get these versions of like, this is what we need to get to, and this is where we're going to, and it's so well-intentioned and it's so clear to you. And it's so, I want to fix and save this person and show up for them. But we forget to see this person in that moment right now. And so what I highly, highly recommend is that you start by asking yourself a really important question. Will I be okay if she's not interested in doing the work? Will it be fair to me if she's, and get really clear. And I think your answer is going to be a resounding yes right now, because I think you're very motivated by the sounds of what you're saying. And I'm not going to tell you to not do that, because I think that you're going to move in that direction anyways. But what I really highly recommend is that you sit down and get really clear and say, what are my boundaries for what I will allow and not allow from me in the relationship? And one of the things you're going to have to do if you even want to try to heal this or move in any direction, there's going to be two things you need at all times in order for it to actually work. Number one, your own boundaries consciously and intentionally ahead of time. Otherwise, her trauma is going to spill into you, and then you're just going to have two traumatized people, and the relationship's not going to work long term anyways. And I'm sorry to be like so direct, but it's just the truth. And I've seen this time and time again. Number two, you're going to have to do a little bit of work around codependency, because there's a part of you that's loving a little bit codependently. And it's got to be next to impossible not to. But, there's been some really painful things that have happened. And I just feel like you're still hyper considering her and under considering yourself, to be quite honest. And it's like, how can I get her to want to work on things? Not like, hey, like she hurt me and I might be interested in working on things, but I need to know that she's going to change this, this, and this, and she's going to show up this way. That's the tone that we want in a situation like this. So that's, you really, really want to do some work around that. And I would also not be like, let's get back right into the marriage again. I would be like, let's like have a conversation and let's just see how that goes. And if I think she's going to show up well and she'd be open to change, but this isn't about you trying to get back into the marriage. And if you are trying to push that and you really want that, I would sit with yourself for a moment and be like, why? Why, when somebody's hurt me and they're not willing to do the work, or they don't want to see a therapist and they push against it, and I know they've got lots of trauma that's likely going to spill onto me unless I am a master at my boundaries and a master at showing up in this way. What in me is driving to fix that so much? And like, I say this with the absolute most compassion and empathy to her as a human being, because again, I can't imagine what she's gone through. But if people take her pain for her in a way that prevents her from resolving it, she's not going to get the chance to one day go, oh my gosh, this is really hard. I need to seek help. And that's going to be the most important thing she does for her entire life and her entire journey, but it has to come from within her. So I get really clear on your boundaries. I do a little bit of work around codependency. I would get really clear on what you need for the relationship to work. I would get really clear on your non-negotiables. For example, if she ever is physically abusive or violent again, absolutely not. And my honest opinion is to not get back into the relationship at all, because she has been physically abusive and violent. And I think that that's no different, quite honestly, than a man being violent to a woman. I think they're one and the same thing. So this is my honest opinion. But I've worked with people for long enough and seen enough to know that sometimes when people are motivated and the heart wants what it wants, that it might move back in that direction anyways. And I'm just giving you some respectful support around that. And so I would just get really clear on my boundaries, codependency, non-negotiables. And then maybe one of your non-negotiables is, hey, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you, that you're bad or broken or wrong, but I'm telling you, you've been through so much that you're absolutely going to need to seek help and to get some therapy and get some work done on you, so that you can heal, because what you've gone through is horrifying, and nobody should have had to go through something like that. And you deserve support, and you deserve love, and you deserve healing. And for me to really progress and get back into a marriage so that we don't keep this cycle of trauma evolving and growing, I think that's going to be a non-negotiable. And maybe that's something you can start with. But I mean, I honor you for being such a strong person and such a perseverant husband, and for being so empathic, and also for sharing. But I hope you honor you to the same degree as well. So thank you for sharing that. Hi, guys. Hi, Jermaine. How are you? Okay, so the next question I have is Irene. Hi, Irene. When my ex had something that bothered him and said he didn't want to talk about it, I let it slide. When I saw him feeling better, I asked about it. He responded by saying that I was being intruding and distasteful. I explained that by sharing what bothered him, I can get to know him better. He told me that if it's me, he wouldn't even ask and just wait till I open up. I'm very confused about this to this day. I would just say this. If you're going to go approach the conversation, I would say, hey, when you said you didn't want to talk about it, I thought you meant at that time. I didn't think you meant in general. And, if it's something that might come back up again, I think it's very productive to talk about it. If you don't want to talk about the actual issue, that's fine. But if you want to share about what you need to feel better, then I would love to hear that. But if you just want it to be hands off altogether, that's okay too. Usually what happens is a dismissive avoidant doesn't want to talk about something. And then when they feel triggered or invaded, like he probably thought that when you said, okay, we don't have to talk about it, that you meant permanently, because he probably meant permanently, but you probably meant like, oh, you don't want to talk about it right now. And so then he probably felt like, oh, you're invading me because you asked about it again. You disrespected a boundary, which is a huge trigger for dismissive avoidance as a general rule. And then when this turned around, and he wanted you to open up, he was like, no, I'm not opening up now. And usually dismissive avoidance will do a thing, honestly, where they try to push away more just to like carve out space for themselves out of rebellion when they feel like their space is invaded. So I think that's what happened, but I would just approach it the way we talked about earlier. Hi, Jen. This is fun. I hope that that's helpful. Let me see. The next question. Oh yeah, you're not being a busybody. You probably just wanted to work things out, but I would just try to see him as much as possible and hear that boundary when he does set it. Bronwyn. Hello, Bronwyn. I'm AA/SA, and my ex is FA. We've been on off for 2 years since he broke up with me. He left again. I'm AA, SA. My ex is FA. Okay. He left again 1 month ago for the same reason as every time. Off for 2 years. Okay. Same reason as every time, of personal development, and said we would never speak again. Hold on. Did I miss something? The same reason as every time, of personal development, and said we would never speak again. Then 2 weeks ago, he messaged showing me the PDS and saying he missed me. Then last week, message asking for some pictures and videos of us that he didn't have. I thought things were going in the right direction. Then last week, message asking for some pictures, videos of us. Oh, right direction. What should I do? Okay. So what I hear is that you have somebody who's doing the push-pull thing, is like, we're going to not talk again. That's it. And now all of a sudden is like coming back in. When you said he's like messaging about PDS, does that mean he jumped into PDS? I'm curious about that. Or is he doing work on himself in some way? I'm curious about that too. Here's what I would do. I would sit down and I would be like, what do I need in this situation? What do I want? And get super clear. And then I would say, if I want him in this relationship, what is required for me to be happy in the relationship? Sometimes we do this thing as human beings where we're like, what's required to get back together? Well, why do you want to get back together? You want to get back together because you're assuming at a subconscious level, because of previous needs that were met, that you're going to be happy. But we want to get really clear when there's been challenges in past relationships. Instead of going, what do we need in order to get back together? We want to go, what do we need in order to be happy when we get back together? And that's the frame you want to see things through. And so I would be like, well, what do we need to be happy so that I don't get into a relationship with him again and it's not fulfilling, and then I just give my life and time and energy to something that hurts me. And so I would make a list of those requirements. And then if he's, doing this like, oh, I miss you and give me pictures from the past, obviously he's still super interested. But super interested, remember, for a fearful avoidant who's unhealed, is, hey, I'm super interested. And maybe they're like interested 8 out of 10. But then, and let's put that on this side. And then let's say on the other side of the scale, they have 5 out of 10 wounds that are like deactivating strategies, fears around relationships, fears around being vulnerable, distrust, fear of commitment. So let's say we've got 8 out of 10 here, 5 out of 10 here. He's only really 3 out of 10 interested at the full level when you take all things into consideration. Not because he's not interested on this degree over here, but just because it's in competition with things here. So how he's going to show up, how he's going to act, how consistent he's going to be, and how giving and just of love and care and everything in the relationship, you're probably going to be closer to a 3 out of 10. And you can kind of think of like relationships as being like that. Like, how ready is somebody for a relationship, and how much do they want a relationship, and how ready is the person for a relationship? And if you've got it like this, they want a relationship 10 out of 10, but 9 out of 10, they're not ready. We don't have a very functional relationship dynamic. So that's what you want to kind of look at when you're measuring the potential of a partner, right? Or getting back together. So then you want to be like, well, he might be 8 out of 10 interested. How do we resolve this stuff here? Is it resolvable? Otherwise, I'm always going to have a partner who is a net 3 out of 10. And I don't mean to like rate people in that way, but I mean like as a measurement of your happiness. That's sort of going to be what you're looking at. And so, can we work on this stuff? Is he willing to work on these things? Can I ask some questions that give me answers around that? Is he aware? Is he going to become aware of deactivating strategies? Is he going to work on his stories in a relationship? If he's willing to do that work, you've got a pretty good chance of being pretty happy in that dynamic. So that's what I would really be trying to clarify and communicate about. And if he's saying, let's look at pictures from the past, I miss you, all these things, then you want to be like, okay, so I hear that you're interested. It's opening my mind to the potential of us getting back together or dating or seeing each other on some form again. But I want to be really clear about my boundaries and what I need. And for me to do that, I have a few questions for you right now before I give too much of my energy to something that might just be painful again. If you're interested, I think you'll hold space to answer some of those questions and for us to be able to have a transparent conversation. And in fact, I would be interested in answering any questions you might have as well. Let's set the intention. Let's sit down, have a super transparent conversation and see what comes out of it. And I would do that from that space. I wouldn't let your mind do the trick of, oh, we're going to get back together and start attaching to an outcome. I would do that truly from a space of being super present in this moment with him, seeing where he's at now, and truly investigating the dynamic to see what comes out of it. So great question. Hi, Maureen. Awesome. That's a cool insight, Princess Con. Hi, Annalisa. Is it usual for DAs to try, if I miss any questions, just try to remember to tag me if you can. Sometimes when I scroll through, especially when there's other answers, I might miss something. Is it usual for DAs to try to give less significance to a relationship when they are deactivating? Absolutely. That is what keeps them safe. For example, my DA will say we are only friends, but his actions don't match his words. They will tell themselves all sorts of stories to literally try to deactivate and keep themselves safe that way. It's like if I can tell myself it's like saying if, we do this a lot as human beings. I see dismissive avoidance do this a lot with money as well. If they're going through financial challenges, they'll say like, well, money doesn't matter. And I mean, like, that's a fair statement. Money only matters to the exact degree of the power that you give to it. But like, if you are not able to do healing work, or you're not able to do things that are important to your personality needs because you're so financially strapped, saying, oh, this thing doesn't matter, doesn't solve the problem. And in fact, probably just perpetuates the problem and allows it to fester. So instead, we want to be like, instead of going, oh, the relationship doesn't matter, we want to be like, whoa, why am I deactivating? Why am I making relationships so minimized? When just from like a really obvious perspective, like relationships are how human beings have survived for so long, like community and how people work together. Like without that, we would have never evolved as long as we did. So like, obviously there's a very important importance, even all the way down to the biological level. So if I'm telling myself a story that something's not important, chances are I have a lot of painful beliefs around it that are causing me to try to minimize as a self-protection mechanism. That's exactly what DAs do. And it's important to do the work around those things so that those processes can change. So great question. So the next question I have, I hear you guys talking about a PDS picnic session. That sounds so great. Yeah, one day we'll do some talks when things open back up again. We'll try to pick where people are and do something central and have like a meeting and like a workshop somewhere live or something like that. That's on the goal. That was originally on the goal for 2021. We'll see how 2021 goes. Hopefully it'll be a little more calm for everybody. So my narcissistic brother's wife reached out. Oh, my narcissistic brother's wife. Okay. I set my boundary regarding the kids. Sorry, I thought for a second you were saying the wife was narcissistic. And I was like, oh, I thought it was the brother, but it's still your brother. I just misread now. I set my boundary regarding the kids. She unloaded and did not respect my boundary about talking to kids only. She is demanding that I answer questions of the past and explain myself, and is now stating without me answering her question, I have chosen. And is now stating without me answering her question, I have chosen. Oh, my fate with the kids. She is forcing a relationship. Do I answer these questions or be vulnerable and stay true to my boundary? Number one, you absolutely pick, like, what is my boundary specifically in the situation? So if you are like, I want to see the kids enough, or I'm willing to try to work on answering or sharing, that's one thing. But if it's like these unreasonable demands, you just, number one, gold standard gold star, like whatever it is, the most important thing you can do is literally sit with yourself and be like, okay, what do I need in the situation? And I mean, to be honest, it sounds like there's a lot of invasiveness and like it's pretty not so healthy, but also quite characteristic of a narcissistic dynamic to say, you are not answering these questions, so I'm going to hold the kids hostage. Like it's part of the dynamic I often see, so it's not that surprising. So I would say, like, do these questions feel important to answer? Do they feel like if I answer and I just give surface level answers, does that feel okay? Is there any reasonable measure that I would feel empowered in this relationship, or at least okay enough in the relationship where the benefits with the kids would outweigh the drawbacks of the frustration of the dynamic? And if the answer is, wow, it's just really unsafe and it's probably going to spill over into the kids in a negative way, then I'm going to have to just respect that boundary for myself. And maybe it's, I know it's really challenging, and I know sometimes these situations can feel like you're painted into a corner a little bit, because sometimes that is what the person's trying to do. It's like, I'm going to manipulate you into showing up the way I expect you to show up, and I'll do that at whatever cost or measure is necessary. But at the end of the day, I can tell you right now, like, that those children are at some point going to realize some of that dynamic. And like, when it is safe to have a relationship where there is more independence, and maybe it's when they're a little bit older, if you explain and express and you have healthy tools and healthy dialogue, you're going to be able to have a healthy dynamic. And if it's just all crazy, wild stuff everywhere, then it might just be healthier for you to set a boundary to yourself. So get very clear on what you need, what you want, all things considered, and then show up and respect that boundary. And if your answer is like, oh, I do want to share questions, or I do want to communicate with her, then, it's worth doing it to see the kids. But just if that's the case, then what you want to do is be like, under what circumstances, with what boundaries intact, under what context, for how long, and get really clear about your time, emotional, thought, everything, boundaries accordingly before you go into that, so that you go in with a nice, healthy suit of armor to protect you from some of the challenges that might arise. So great questions. Jill says, I have a history of sexual abuse. I become controlling and jealous in relationships. It is embarrassing and shaming. Any thoughts? Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. This is really common, my dear. So the reason that it's common is because what sexual abuse teaches people that we can't really trust, right? It teaches that people can be dangerous, people can be sneaky, people can be conniving. And then if you love somebody and they're somebody in your adult life 30 years later, but those are your beliefs that you're carrying from those incidents that you experienced, then that's going to be the filter you love somebody through. You're going to love them through a lack of trust. You're going to love them through jealousy, and not, what's jealousy? Jealousy is often that you don't trust somebody, and so, or you're afraid of losing the person or the connection because of wounds within you. So either way it shows up, right? It's literally going to say, like, you're loving through the filter of trauma. So what you want to do in this situation that will be really, really helpful, and obviously it's most helpful if you do this with a professional or something like that, but you can sit down and you can go and be like, what are all the stories I came to believe about people, or about love and closeness and intimacy and connection because of the experiences that I went through? And try to take some time to sit on it. It might not be the most fun experience, but it's really you being with yourself. It's you loving the wounded parts of yourself to be able to bring them into presence and connection to you. And I would write out all the beliefs that come up, and I would really work to challenge those things, because I often say to people, like, if somebody a long time ago planted painful seeds in your mind, every time we have those seeds activated, the jealousy, the controllingness, because those fears are getting loud, we're watering the seeds accidentally. It's the re-traumatization. And what we owe to ourselves, if we've been through trauma, is we absolutely owe to ourselves to find every single little one of those seeds in the lawn or the framework of our subconscious mind, and pluck them all out and stop watering them, because we don't want to take what happened that was traumatic years ago and keep bringing that back into the relationship to ourselves on autopilot, because that person hurt us once and we never ever want to hold space for those things to recur. So go in there, try to find every little seed that you can, and then try to start changing your stories and asking people that you love, asking, what are relationships to you? What do they feel like to you? What is trust like to you? Like getting information, getting things that actually help to really challenge those programmed beliefs that you would have taken away from that traumatic experience. And then I would ask yourself too, what were the greatest needs I had when that experience happened to me? Like not necessarily in the moment itself, but in that time frame of life. So if you were 8 years old, 10 years old, like what did I need? Maybe I needed support. Maybe I needed safety. Maybe I needed whatever those things are. Those are going to be the qualities you pick in partners. B, those are going to be the qualities that you ask for from partners, right? So if you have a partner right now, a boyfriend or a girlfriend right now, you want to say like, hey, safety is really important to me. Consistency is really important to me. Transparency is really important to me, and ask for those things actively in a relationship, or people you're dating, or future people that you date, like, whatever it is, those need to be things that are at the forefront. And doing the work on the unmet needs, doing the work on questioning the stories and reprogramming them subconsciously through repetition, through the gathering of information repetitively over time, is going to help to make you feel like you're safer in relationships. And another way of finding it too is you can go, when I'm controlling or jealous in relationships, why? What am I afraid of? Where do these things come from? And do sort of a deep dive into that. So I hope that helps. I just want to say one other thing. There's nothing embarrassing or shameful about that. You should feel exactly that way after what you've been through. Your emotions are just there to try to protect you. They're doing their job. They're letting you know, hey, we still have these painful things inside of us. And until you do the work and isolate it, if you weren't feeling that way, something has gone wrong, right? Because your emotions didn't show up. They're not trying to protect you. So there's nothing embarrassing or shameful about that. And I think it's really beautiful and powerful that you shared that with everybody. And it's so much more common than you think. I'll say that as well. Can you suggest some ways of getting rid of learned helplessness? Yes, learned helplessness is because we've projected feelings of disempowerment onto something that we're trying to do. Ask yourself, what are the reasons I feel helpless? Write them all out, and then break those things down into really, really tiny chunks. I'm combining words a lot today. Tiny chunks of little action steps so that you can get going on that experience itself. So Cindy says, how to cope with when an FA-leaning DA won't show up and do the work. I'm feeling like I don't do things right. It's over now and I feel foolish with staying with him. I'm FA-leaning AA with him. You absolutely set a deadline. How long am I willing to show up and do this work before it feels truly self-sacrificial? Get really clear about that. If you don't see the needle moving within that deadline in that period of time, then you have to walk away. And I know it's not easy, but if you set this intention ahead of time, you have a clear, conscious deadline, then and then you sort of have this time to be like, I'm going to pour everything into it. If it doesn't work, I know I can walk away guilt and regret free. So it's a great question. So the next one, Stuart. Hi, Stuart. Hi, Thais. I was wondering, can my frightening experience... Good to see you, by the way. You've been in here and showing up so well for you're like one of the core people who's been in here since the beginning. I was wondering, can my frightening experience as a 4 to 5-year-old boy with a dog that chased and humiliated me, it went to the toilet on me, I'm sorry to hear that, be transferred to a trigger with people if I feel I'm being humiliated? 100%. 100,000%. And not just there, I've seen so many versions of this over the years, like, oh my gosh, all sorts of things. And I'm glad you recognize that, because sometimes people can feel like they're having a hard time finding the source of triggers. But 100% there, and it can definitely transfer into there. And I've seen different versions of this as well with just all kinds of stories. A cat scratching a child and that child feeling super unsafe, and then having that unsafety show up in different places, like so many different versions of this. So, thank you. So 100%. And what I would do is I would literally do the work on that experience, because that's a trauma to a 4 or 5-year-old kid. It feels like your life is ending. Like that's the magnitude of emotions we experience during a specific event is the magnitude of the imprint that had, is how large that trauma was. So if you were 5 years old and that is 4 or 5 years old and that was like 10 out of 10, you had a 10 out of 10 trauma. And so you want to acknowledge that, and you want to bring up, I know you probably are excellent at working through these things by now, but bring up like just the fact that you found that, I think, is really amazing. But bring up, okay, what were the feelings associated with that experience? Let me do the work around those feelings. What were the unmet needs? Let me work on meeting those needs and start showing up from that perspective. And it will help to heal what your subconscious mind is reprojecting onto people based on the stored emotion around the experience itself. So great questions. Hi, Jamie. Nice to see you. So, Harry says, I work in a small kitchen. Hello, Harry. I work in a small kitchen and I am second in charge to a narcissist manager. What is the best way to work with somebody like this? Honestly, one of the best things you can do is, number one, be clear on your boundaries. And number two, do something called gray rocking. And it's honestly, it's sort of like an overly simplified answer, but it's something that I've seen that's been very effective in people, especially in the workplace with a narcissist. And it's this concept or idea where you literally try to be like as dull as possible. Like, don't give too much positive expression of emotion. Don't give too much negative, and try to collaborate that with setting boundaries effectively the entire time as well. So being able to say, hey, that's not cool to speak to somebody that way, and doing that, but just from a very balance-centered perspective, and only when you feel that it's important. Like, pick your battles, right? And then also when you come home, I mean, if it's a really painful work environment, it's okay to leave too. I know that's a really scary thing to say, but it's if you're repeatedly exposed to something, you'll be a little bit exposed to the potential for narcissistic abuse, right? Especially in, I know kitchen environments are so stressful. So what I would say as well is that go home and do the work on yourself every evening. Like, if this person criticized you, don't let that seep in there and stay. Like, if the person criticized you, go back and be like, okay, I felt not good enough when that happened. How am I good enough? How do I do my job well? And show up so that you don't also allow that person to like permeate and create negativity in your self-esteem. So I'm just going to answer one last question, and then I'm going to have to run in just a second. So Caitlin says, I've been feeling embarrassed by AA and triggering the DA/FA people around me. I'm working really hard to change my behaviors, but how can I be kinder to myself when experiencing limerence or reaching out for emotional connection to be safe? I would do two things. Number one, I would proactively fill your buckets for connection. So have like a daily habit or strategy so that you are ingraining self-connection and relationship to you. It can be journaling, it can be meditation, anything where you're being like really present with yourself and really like in relationship to self, reflecting, hearing, seeing, understanding. And over time, what you'll just naturally see is then your subconscious, once it trusts that connection, it starts to then allow itself to derive fulfillment from that connection and feel like, okay, I can fill my own cup, which will proactively prevent that need to reach out. Number two, please realize that there's nothing embarrassing about what you're doing. Like, it is literally a trauma response that you're experiencing, and it's a way that your subconscious mind adapted to really painful and scary experiences at some point in your life. And then when it comes to limerence, I would write, what are the traits or qualities that I'm connecting to in other people, and how can I notice the patterns of when I experience in that limerence? So like, literally, this is a fun exercise. Write down the last 5 people you experienced limerence around, and then write out the traits or qualities you noticed in those people. Okay, you'll see that there's a pattern in there. It might not be exact, but you'll see something in there that is very pattern oriented. And then I would be like, okay, how can I start empowering those traits or qualities within myself more? And as you do that, you're creating more of a wholeness in your subconscious mind at a deeper level. So great question. And the last question is, hi, Thais, how can I have frequent conversations with a DA? It was not too much to begin with and has decreased since the corona even more. Yeah, I mainly want to get him to know him more to see if we are a fit for each other. Okay, so great question. So what I would say is that you can only do your best, right? You can only show up to a certain degree. And if the person's not showing up back, then I would put a deadline around it. So I'd be like, how long am I going to? Because a lot of dismissive avoidance during COVID, like if they don't have active strategies or they're not working on themselves, usually they can start feeling down. And then the more down they feel, the more they withdraw, and it just becomes cyclical. So what I would do is I would just get really clear, and I would be like, okay, how can I dive into communicating, but at the same time with my deadline? So I would try to do something so you reach out and there's some kind of connection happening slowly over time. But again, we were talking last weekend about it has to be sort of like a tennis match. Somebody brought that analogy. I think it was Jersey. And it's a great analogy. Like, you really want some kind of back and forth. And if there's not that, then you can basically count on the fact that what you're getting now is what you're probably going to get long term, unless the person miraculously is like, I'm dismissive avoidant and I want to do the work. So just make sure you're checked in, tuned into yourself and what feels good and rewarding and empowering for you. And if you are like, you know what, it doesn't feel so good to be in this space with him now, and he's probably not going to do the work. And so, he's expressed disdain towards things like that, or let's just say. So then why am I so attracted to this person if I don't like the way that they make me feel right now? What is it? And try to dig into that. Am I attracted to how good they are with their boundaries, and it's a reflection of something I need to equilibrate within myself? Am I attracted to their dismissiveness, and it kind of makes me feel like, whoa, what am I going to get? And it puts me in fight or flight response. And where is that dismissiveness familiar that my subconscious comfort zone is seeking out in an adult romantic partner? So make a list of like what it is that attracts you, and see like maybe those are things I need to heal instead of things I need to date. Right? And that's where I would sort of dive into there, just to be super clear with yourself. So it's a wonderful, wonderful question. Okay. So thank you guys so much. We're going to do another open Q&A on Tuesday. If you didn't get your question answered, come early, post your question. Don't come earlier than 30 minutes in advance, because YouTube cuts off questions 30 minutes or so after. And so jump in there. Thank you guys all so much. Thanks for so many people sticking around all Saturday. I mean, I guess it's only like 2.5 hours, but I really, really appreciate you guys so much. I love doing these webinars with all my heart. They're so fun for me. And I would love to see everybody's faces. And so we'll try to do something like that in the future too. But thank you all so much for being here. I hope you have an amazing Saturday. Happy 4th of July. I almost said happy Canada Day, but Canada Day was like 4 days ago. And thank you so much. I will see you guys soon. Bye, guys.